I have written another article for New Eastern Outlook. It is titled Washington's Golden Dome, Multi-Trillion Tax Dollar Heist at Best, Dangerous Provocation at Worst. This is another predictable announcement made by the Trump administration. Many people will say this is a project to defend the United States from missiles launched at it from all around the world. This is a good thing. How could you possibly find fault with this? And this announcement depends on the general public's ignorance of how modern warfare works, what is a genuine threat to the United States, and how you would defend against it, and what is actually, in fact, a dangerous provocation and an overturning of the checks and balances that actually have kept the world free of nuclear war for decades and decades. So I'm going to read this article as I always do. I'll add additional information when and if necessary. And of course, I will show you all of the sources that I cited while writing this. So let's begin. US President Donald Trump has announced his administration has chosen the architecture for the proposed Golden Dome missile defense system, claiming it will cost $175 billion and be operational in less than 3 years with a success rate close to 100%. Almost nothing about that is true. I'll get to it in turn. During President Trump's announcement, and this is, all of these links will be in the video description below. He announced this in a about 22-minute long video on the White House YouTube channel. There's a couple of things that, if you watch it, should leap out at you if you're listening carefully, and I will talk about some of them here. This was May 21st, 2025. It was claimed the Golden Dome will consist of technology deployed across land, sea, and space, capable of intercepting hypersonic, ballistic, and advanced cruise missiles. And this is a quote, even if they are launched from the other sides of the world, and even if they are launched from space. Former US President Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, which is also known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, was repeatedly cited during the announcement. That program sought to use space-based weapons to void the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, allowing the US to conduct a nuclear or non-nuclear first strike on another nation and avoid what had otherwise been an inevitable nuclear retaliation that would destroy both nations in the process. So mutually assured destruction means, let's just use the US and Russia as an example. The US has nuclear weapons, Russia has nuclear weapons. If Russia carried out a strike on the US would retaliate. Both nations would be destroyed. What does this result in? Both nations never launching direct attacks on each other. It prevents war. Mutually assured destruction is the greatest form of arms control. It is the only reason nuclear war has not broke out since nuclear weapons were conceived. When the US was the only nation that had nuclear weapons, what did it do? Dropped 2 of them immediately on Japan. And then it talked about dropping them on everybody else, on Korea, on China, on Vietnam. They even talked about dropping them on Afghanistan. But as other nations developed their own nuclear weapons, the US was unable to even consider using them on these nations because of mutually assured destruction. The Star Wars program and now the Golden Dome seek to prevent other nations from retaliating, allowing the US to carry out a first strike with absolute impunity. That is the point of this program. Not to defend the United States, but to give the US impunity to attack anyone else without the fear of retaliation. Specifically because mutually assured destruction was seen as a better deterrence against first strike by one nuclear-armed nation against another, along with concerns over costs, technological limitations, and then existing arms control treaties like the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, ABM. The initiative was never fully realized. So this Star Wars program under President Reagan was never fully realized because of a number of limitations back then. But many of those limitations have been lifted since then. This is why the US has circled back to this terrible, terrible idea. So the next section of the article is titled Granting the U.S. Impunity to Attack Others, Not Defend Itself. U.S. Space Force General Michael Gutlin, picked to lead the Golden Dome project and present during its announcement, would claim, and this is a direct quote from him, "As you're aware, our adversaries have become very capable and very intent on holding the homeland at risk. While we have been focused on keeping the peace overseas, our adversaries have been quickly modernizing their nuclear forces, building out ballistic missiles capable of hosting multiple warheads, building out hypersonic missiles capable of attacking the United States within an hour and traveling at 6,000 miles per hour, building cruise missiles that can navigate around our radar and our defenses, and building submarines that can sneak up to our shores, and worse yet, building space weapons. It is time that we change that equation and start doubling down on the protection of the homeland." Is that what the U.S. is doing? Are they overseas keeping the peace? Is that what they're actually really doing? Who believes that? I don't think anyone believes that. And this is what I say in the article. Yet what General Gutlin calls keeping the peace overseas is in reality the United States encroaching along the borders and shores of nations like Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea. Encroaching upon these nations, attempting to contain them, and waging both direct and proxy war against them, spanning many decades now. A constant siege of all of these countries. They react by creating these capabilities so that they can retaliate if ever they're directly attacked. And the United States wants to mitigate those forms of retaliation to allow themselves to continue encircling and containing these nations. So this is all about empowering American aggression and primacy over the globe, not protecting itself from others they always claim are actually trying to dominate the planet. This includes the stationing of not only missile defense systems like Patriot, THAAD, and the Aegis Ashore system in close proximity to these nations in violation of the ABM Treaty. The U.S. has since abandoned. That was under the Bush Jr. administration, but also first strike offensive weapons like the Typhoon missile launcher, capable of firing both standard SM-6 anti-air missiles, but also ground-launched Tomahawk cruise missiles, previously prohibited under the INF Treaty. The U.S. has also since abandoned, and that was President Trump during his first administration. He abandoned the INF Arms Control Treaty specifically so they could create this global spanning infrastructure to stop nations from shooting missiles back at the U.S. when attacked, shooting them down right there at their border, and also lining up missile systems capable of striking directly back at these nations, where, unlike an intercontinental ballistic missile, which you will see being launched, you'll be able to track over a long period of time, these missiles are much closer. The reaction time is much shorter. For example, the U.S. has positioned THAAD systems in both the Middle East and Asia. We have articles like this. This is from 2025. U.S. relocates Patriot and THAAD air defense systems to Middle East as tensions surge with Houthis, also known as Ansar Allah. But these systems are also there to encircle and contain Iran. We also have this. U.S. to deploy THAAD missile battery to South Korea. This was 2016. So this has been going on for years, and it transcends all presidential administrations. Everything President Trump is doing by proposing the Golden Dome was all, the stage was set by everyone who came before him, including President Biden, President Obama, and President George Bush Jr. Beyond the global spanning military footprint of the United States, Washington is also preparing for or already directing multiple proxy wars against these nations. The conflict in Ukraine was entirely engineered by the United States, beginning with Kiev's political capture in 2014. The training and arming of Ukrainian forces, remember, that took place under the first Trump administration, and the capture, reorganization, and direction of Ukraine's intelligence agencies by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. And I've showed you this article from the New York Times many times. The Spy War, how the CIA secretly helps Ukraine fight Putin. For more than a decade, the U.S. has been creating these networks. This does not start with Russia's 2022 special military operation. Started when the U.S. overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014. The U.S. has also been waging war and proxy war against Iran for decades, including invading and occupying Afghanistan and Iraq right on its borders, invading and overthrowing the government of Iran's ally Syria, the waging of war on Yemen-based Ansar Allah, also an Iranian ally. The U.S. also maintains constant financial, political, and military support for Israel, which has repeatedly attacked Iran and its allies. And despite officially recognizing Taiwan as part of One China, the U.S. officially has a One China policy. It agreed to this with China in the Shanghai Communique. Taiwan is part of China. There's only one government of China, the People's Republic of China in Beijing. Taiwan is part of China. This is what the U.S. recognizes. It does not challenge that officially. Unofficially, it is encouraging separatism in Taiwan. It is arming Taiwan. It is also staging U.S. troops in Taiwan. That's what I say in the articles. Continued supporting separatist political parties, administering Taipei, is arming local military forces, and is even stationing U.S. troops on Taiwan. Taiwan confirms U.S. troops on frontline islands near China. This was 2024, and this continues under the Trump administration right now. All of this has forced Russia, Iran, China, and other nations to respond by bolstering military spending, increasing research and development into missile technology, and the creation of credible deterrence against decades-spanning U.S. aggression and proxy war along and even within their borders. The U.S. is provoking these nations to react and create a means of retaliating against the U.S. if ever they are attacked directly by the United States. While the Trump administration depicts the Golden Dome as necessary to forever end the missile threat to the American homeland, it is instead being built to enable the U.S. to forever threaten other nations around the globe with its own missiles. Now, let's talk about these claims of a near 100% success. At one point during the Golden Dome's announcement, U.S. President Trump would claim, "I will tell you, an adversary told me, a very big adversary told me, the most brilliant people in the world are Silicon Valley," he said. "We cannot duplicate them. We can't." He also claimed, "We have things that nobody else can have. You see what we've done helping Israel. You probably wouldn't have an Israel. They launched probably 500 missiles altogether, and I think 1/2 of a missile got through, and that was only falling to the ground as scrap metal." Except none of that is true. And we know that's not true because U.S. government-funded media itself admitted that this isn't true. And we could look at this NPR article. NPR is U.S. government-funded media. Satellite images showed dozens of Iranian missiles struck near Israeli airbase. Struck near? Not really. If you look at the picture, it actually struck the airbase. Dozens of missiles. If President Trump is referring to the 2024 Iranian retaliatory attack on Israel, up to 200 missiles were fired, with dozens, if not scores of them, circumventing Israeli missile defenses and striking targets, including dozens striking and damaging Israel's Nevatim air base alone, according to NPR, the article that I just showed you. No air or missile defense system has a success rate close to 100%, which is what the Trump administration claims the Golden Dome will have. While any particular system may have a success rate close to 100%, intercepting individual targets, retaliatory strikes are planned specifically to include a large enough number of missiles, drones, and other projectiles to saturate a defense system's ability to intercept them all during a single attack. This means that while many incoming targets will be intercepted, many others will not, and critical targets will inevitably be struck and destroyed. This is how Iran carried out that strike on Israel. It knew a lot of those missiles were never going to make it to their target. They designed the strike so that they can first saturate and overwhelm Israeli air and missile defenses, and so that a large enough number of missiles will still get through to hit each one of the targets. This is what we have seen play out in the conflict in Ukraine, both Russian attacks on Ukraine and Ukrainian attacks on Russia. Russia has some of the best missile defense systems on planet Earth. They're still not 100% effective. Regarding the state of U.S. missile defense technology, unless President Trump is referring to undisclosed innovations top secret technology we don't know anything about. Nothing the US currently is known to possess in terms of air and missile defense systems consist of things that nobody else can have. And while in the past, Silicon Valley drove unparalleled advances in technology, contributing to a decisive military advantage for the United States, the gap has since drastically closed and in some instances is widening in favor of nations like Russia and China. The conflict in Ukraine, for example, has demonstrated glaring Russian advantages in several key areas that void the entire premise the Golden Dome is predicated on. Russia has demonstrated that it is capable of producing both large quantities of ballistic and cruise missiles, as well as layered integrated air defense systems at a fraction of the cost the US and its European partners spend on arms and ammunition production. Russia's advantage is so great, it prompted the first ever US National Defense Industrial Strategy in 2022. I did a whole article and video on this. And this was the United States admitting that Russia is spending a fraction of what the US spends on military spending, and yet it has more weapons with better capabilities than the US. And then they're trying to figure out why and how they can change this. The paper admitted the US, and the rest of the collective West for that matter, suffers from a bloated, inefficient military-industrial base, incapable of meeting the demands of the type of large-scale, high-intensity, protracted warfare taking place in Ukraine, and likely to take place in future conflicts with either Russia or China. As previously reported, the paper, so I did a whole article on this one right here, and the link will be in the video description below. You can find this. There's also a video on my channel where I read this and added additional information. Fatal flaws undermine America's defense industrial base. These are problems that, because of this very system that oversees US foreign and domestic policy, they are incapable of solving these problems. So as previously reported, the paper lays out a multitude of problems plaguing the US military-industrial base, including a lack of surge capacity, an inadequate workforce, overdependence on offshore downstream suppliers, as well as insufficient demand signals to motivate private industry partners to produce what's needed and the quantities needed when it is needed. In fact, the majority of the problems identified by the report involved private industry and its unwillingness to meet national security requirements because they were not profitable. Nations like Russia and China do not rely on private industry partners for national defense programs. Much of the industrial power researching, developing, and mass-producing arms and ammunition in these countries takes place within state-owned enterprises. Because national defense is the chief priority of these enterprises, money is invested whether it is profitable or not. That is what makes all of the difference. This is what allows Russian and Chinese industry to maintain huge workforces, facilities, and tooling, even when production is reduced, while private industry in the West would slash all three to maximize profitability. Not only would they have done that, they did do that. That's why they don't have surge capacity right now, and that is why they're unable to keep up with just Russia in regards to this proxy war raging inside of Ukraine. The first model, using state-owned enterprises, allows a nation to surge the production of arms and ammunition on short notice. The other model, using private industry, requires strong enough demand signals to justify the time-consuming process of building up the levels of all three, a process that can take years. And we watched the US come out with this report in 2022. None of the problems described in that report, all the way back in 2022, have been solved. It is now 2025. None of the problems described regarding the US military industrial base have been addressed since the National Defense Industrial Strategy was published in 2022. I just said that. Corporations like Lockheed, Raytheon, L3 Harris, which are all going to be involved in the Golden Dome, by the way, and newer companies like Anduril, slated to play a role in the proposed Golden Dome system, continue to pursue a strictly for-profit model that will create the same disparity in quantity and quality seen playing out on and over the battlefield in Ukraine, including in relation to missiles and missile defense systems. This leaves the likelihood the Golden Dome, like other modern US military programs, will fall far short of slated expectations because of the fraud, waste, and abuse that defines US military industrial production. The ultimate irony is that while the Golden Dome is sold to the public as protecting America, vast sums of public money that could actually improve the lives of Americans at home through infrastructure, education, and healthcare will instead be siphoned off by demonstrably incompetent and corrupt arms manufacturers, all in an attempt to enhance Washington's ability to menace the rest of the world with greater impunity, not protect the US at home. So there's the reality of why they're building the Golden Dome, and then there's the reality of how they're going to try to build it and all of the problems that are going to happen because of this. The rest of the world will predictably react to the Golden Dome by creating their own means to defend themselves and retaliate against the US if attacked, making Americans not only less safe, but in the process of building the Golden Dome, less prosperous. So the Golden Dome is very unlikely to be able to achieve all of these objectives, nearly 100% success rate, downing all of these missiles that could come from intercontinental ballistic missiles basically coming in from space, cruise missiles coming in almost ground level from launched from submarines right off America's coasts, drones and everything else that could be launched at the United States. How are you going to create a system that can see all of this and destroy it before it ever reaches US cities, for example? If the US carried out a first strike on Russia or China and they decided to launch all of their intercontinental ballistic missiles loaded up with nuclear weapons, each missile has a collection of warheads that are independently targetable. Remember the Orishnik that Russia launched against a non-nuclear missile with independently targetable kill vehicles coming down from the original missile. How are you intercepting all of that? We see the track record of, say, the Patriot or THAAD already. We can see it in Ukraine, easily overwhelmed, and not just by individual missile strikes, but the ability for Russia to produce huge amounts of missiles. The US literally cannot build enough interceptors for every ballistic missile Russia is making that it could shoot at a target protected by a Patriot missile system. So how's the Golden Dome going to overcome all of this? The best, most logical, most realistic answer is it's not going to. So they're going to make America much less safe. They're also going to transfer this. They're talking about billions of dollars. I guarantee you it's going to be much more expensive than that. It's not. None of these programs ever come in on time and on budget. Is probably going to balloon into the trillions if the plug isn't pulled like it was with Star Wars under President Reagan. It's going to consume huge amounts of public money that could have been spent on things Americans actually need to live decent lives back in the United States. It's also going to provoke other nations into spending on research and development and building out vast arsenals, stockpiles of missiles that are capable of overwhelming whatever the architecture of this system ends up being. So again, this is what the US has been doing all along, and this is what President Trump has come into office and is now continuing. He's not changing anything. He's not fighting back against the so-called deep state. The arms manufacturers are part of the deep state. What is the deep state? It is all of these unelected corporations and financial institutions that use all of their money and power and influence to push forward policy that benefits them at the cost of everyone on earth, including Americans in America. So he's going along with this. He's facilitating it. He's helping transfer tax dollars to these corrupt corporations. He's not fighting back against it. That's the reality. The Golden Dome is not some exciting project Americans should be proud of. It's another indicator that everything in America continues to go in the wrong direction. I don't blame people for wanting to believe someone was going to come in and change everything, but this has demonstrably not happened. Americans need to start thinking about what to do next. That is the article. That is my video. If you liked this video, if you thought it was useful, please like and share. That helps a lot. People often say, why do you keep reminding us to like and share? I mean, I remind people all the time to like and share. And even when I watch videos, I catch myself sometimes forgetting to like and share good content that I see and that I appreciate. So please like and share the video. Check out the video description below. Has all of the other places you can find and follow my work. I publish all of my videos on Rumble, on YouTube, on X, and Telegram. All of the links that I referenced, including this article that I was just reading, all of that is in the video description below. You can check that out for yourself. There are also ways you can help support my work in the video description below. I do not monetize my YouTube channel or any of the other platforms that I am on. If ads pop up, feel free to skip them. They're not helping me out at all. If you do want to help support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also through Patreon. To everyone who has been helping out, whether it's a one-time donation, donations month to month, or if you have no resources to spare and you're just helping share my work with others, that is all greatly appreciated. That is what allows me to continue doing this work. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.